welcome to the University of Law podcast and to the next episode in our Future Solicitor series. My name is Amanda Crutchley. I'm head of Pro Bono here at the university. Today's podcast, we're going to be having a look and talking about the SQE route, and in particular in relation to qualified work experience. And I am delighted to be joined by Andy Lee. Andy is currently studying the SQE, so I'll just hand over to Andy to say hello to you all and introduce himself.
Hi guys, thanks for tuning into this podcast, and hopefully we'll be able to offer some kind of tips and some useful stuff for you to get out of it. So I've done SQE 1 in January. I did SQE 2 in about April, May, and I'm just waiting to hear the results. And so I'm just polishing off the last bit of the SQE Plus, which is part of this course at the University of Law, before starting a training contract in about 3 weeks' time, at the start of September. So much is afoot.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andy. And dare I ask, how you found the course in relation to the kind of the exams that you've done? Has it been useful, relevant? Have the resources been good? Put you a bit on the spot here. Didn't know this question was coming.
No, it's not at all a problem. I think the resources have been pretty much spot on, especially for SQE 1. The university has this like question bank that's about 3,000 questions large. So that's really helpful just to get you kind of practiced as well. The sessions are really helpful because you can literally just pick an expert's brain on whatever kind of question you've conjured up. So that's really good. And then kind of the SQE 2 stuff, more practical stuff, there was a lot of opportunities for us to kind of practice with each other. So I felt really quite well prepared for especially SQE 1. So yeah, I say pretty spot on for me.
Fabulous. Because I know we were talking just before we came on here, didn't we, about the SQE. It's not just about the knowledge that you need to learn. It's actually a whole new way of examination as well. And actually it's understanding what they're after and how to provide those answers. That's important. But I think, today, what we thought we'd be focusing on that would be really useful for people to learn about and hear about is qualified work experience, and how that fits into the SQE. And I think it's really important. I think there's we were saying before, I think there's some really clear messages and headlines that I'd really like students to be aware of and understand. I think there's lots of pros to QWE, but also there are a few landmines to QWE if you're not aware of them. So I think if it's okay, Andy, I'll just start and kind of highlight really what QWE is for students who maybe are a little bit unsure about what it is, how it fits into SQE, where it fits in, what fits in, all those kind of questions. And then maybe, you can come in and give your thoughts on it as well. So QWE, qualified work experience, is the new term for the recognised period of training, or what historically has been the training contract that everybody had to do. The SRA, obviously, who is the regulator, was looking at how the recognised period of training actually should fit, what form it should take, with their hope, really, that SQE becomes more accessible to all, allows kind of diverse entry into the profession, and actually what would be the best formula for this qualified work experience to look like, how it should fit. And so they're quite relaxed, really, in relation to qualified work experience. That I wonder whether that's going to change in time, because I think it's a little bit too open-ended for my liking. And I think, certainly I've been a voice saying, actually, I think we need more. I think people need more structure. It's all very well to be kind of quite relaxed, but I think actually for something like this, people need direction on actually what is required. But effectively what they're saying is you need 2 years full-time equivalent of qualified legal experience. And we were saying, well, is 2 years then a full-time? Is it 35 hours per week for 2 years? Is that what you're saying? And they said, well, kind of there or thereabouts. I think, with integrity, if anyone's signing it off, 2 years full-time equivalent has to be, you're looking at 2 years of 35 hours a week. I think that's your starting point. Although there is no specification on that, I think that's what you should be aiming for. It can be historical. So if you've got experience in the past, that can count, as well as the future. So there's a bonus in that for people, for example, who've been doing paralegal work, who've maybe had that relevant experience historically, who now actually can claim it. So that's a little nugget of incentive for people as well. Some points you have to bear in mind with it. It has to be grounded in legal work. So deading files in the back office, you might say is grounded in legal work, but no, it's not. So basic office administration tasks do not count. It also has to be giving legal services, which effectively is legal advice and assistance to a client to qualify. So as an example, at the university, we have something called street law, which is giving presentations in the community. That won't count. Neither will learning about an area of law that you might give advice on. That doesn't count. Training, unlikely really to count unless it's very specific. It has to be that performance of a service, a legal service to a client. So, simply photocopying papers, unless it's a specific preparation of a bundle, photocopying papers, doing some training, that doesn't count. And it has to develop some or more. With some, they say 2 really is a minimum. Some are more of the solicitor competencies. Now, there are 18 competencies. They are listed on the SRA website. So if you haven't seen these, anyone listening, if you haven't seen the solicitor competencies, one of the first things you need to do as your homework today is to go to the SRA website and have a look at qualified work experience and what counts as solicitor competencies, because your qualified work experience has to demonstrate that you have developed at least 2, but hopefully as many as you can of the solicitor competencies. And they are things like working with people, understanding professional ethics, professional development. And so you have to show that you've done that. You have to show that you have you've done the required hours, that you've done the required work, and you have to have it signed off either by a solicitor on the roll of England and Wales or a CULP from practice. Now, I will come on in a bit to whether you can get that from abroad. You can, but it has to still fall within all those same guidelines. So I think for anybody who's navigating what do I need to do for my qualified work experience? Does what I do count? Does work I've done abroad count? Keep coming back to those fundamentals. Has to be grounded in legal work. It has to be giving a client a service. It has to develop some or more of the competencies. You have to show you've done the 2 years full-time equivalent, and you have to demonstrate that you've done that. And you need somebody to be able to say, who's signing off, to say, I was aware at the time, I had knowledge at the time of this happening, and I'm happy to sign that off. They're the main points that you need to do. Andy, have you got any thoughts?
Thank you for kind of giving the overview, especially on the kind of the strict rules to actually qualify. But we're having a conversation a little bit before as well about, obviously there's the rules that you have to, threshold you have to get over first to qualify. But then there's also a practical element of, well, I'd actually really kind of like a job at the end of this, and I would like to have a career where I can practice properly, I'll get sued for negligence, because it's a serious business at this stage. So I mean, you raised a really interesting point before about you've got to think really carefully about what tasks you're actually doing.
And I think you should see qualified work experience as no different, really, in principle, to the old training contract period of recognised training. You should be sitting down with whoever is going to recruit you for that qualified work experience and saying, okay, what training programme are you putting in place for me? What development pathways are you putting in? How are you going to effectively train me to be a competent solicitor in the future? What is my training plan for these 2 years? What breadth of experience are you going to give me? That is so important. So please, 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 if you're listening to this, the SRA have dangled a carrot to you with this qualified work experience, snatching it, just tick off the hours and you can do it up to 4 places. But please, please, please don't lose sight of the fact this is your training for your career. know your worth. It's got to have value. It's got to reflect what you want to do in the future. It's got to be really valuable training.
Yeah, and I'd only echo that. Thank you. Very comprehensive kind of overview. I remember doing some work experience when I was a teenager, and I was quite happy to just make the brews and sit quietly in the corner and
Absolutely.
yeah, and on the CV it goes, and we're kind of past that stage now. This is really, it's meant to be actually a really good experience for you to personally develop and to actually get some experience of a profession that hopefully you'll really enjoy. So kind of making the brews all the time is no longer enough. The only other kind of thing I would add to that is an alternative is if you know you're absolutely dead set on being a conveyancer, you just love land law, you love real estate law, great for you, then this is an opportunity for you to specialise. That is the flip side. But I think, you raise a really good point, Amanda, is that's got to be a conscious decision from you, this is what my career is going to look like, I'm going to get all the training and specialise. So then, my CV and my employability in this area is going to be far higher than someone like me. So I've got a training contract and I'll be doing 4 different seats. So if someone spent 2 years in real estate, they're going to be far better than me if I spend 6 months. So you could leverage this to your advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, historically, I was saying before, I was criminal defence solicitor. Training contracts effectively, recognised periods of training, is kind of drying out in those areas because there wasn't the breadth of experience to offer students. And so, pure criminal firms, family law firms, human rights, immigration, all those practices have not had a steady flow of recruitment because actually they don't have the business plan, they don't have the setup to offer training contracts and rotate you round the different seats that you needed. Now, if a student thinks, I really don't want to do corporate law, I don't want to do commercial law, I'm passionate about human rights and immigration, I'm passionate, now is the opportunity, absolutely, to do that and become an expert in that area. I guess that, the joy of the training contract, I thought I wanted to do crime. I kind of nearly put my head on kind of like, in my bed and never got out of it again when I had some 6 months in conveyancing because that just wasn't for me. And I knew that, but actually it cemented my belief. And I had, you have your taste of it and you think, absolutely, the reality of this is what I thought it might be. And it definitely isn't for me. But equally, you hear a lot of people that say, I did my seat in property and, I really enjoyed it unexpectedly. It was a good department, had a great mentor. But yes, I agree. I think that, like we said, I think there are pros to the model of qualified work experience. If you can, I think you used the great word with leverage. If you can leverage it right to suit you, being aware of the potential pitfalls that lie with it, I think it could be great. And I'm hoping for the social welfare sector, for legal aid sectors that have lost really that steady flow of young, enthusiastic junior lawyers coming into it, that actually this might kickstart that again to some degree. But students have to be really careful that these firms are offering training with a breadth of development opportunities for those competencies. Yeah. Absolutely.
And, just to add a final point as well, I come from a non-law background and I've converted. So I tried to pick a kind of training contract provider that would offer me that breadth because honestly, I'm very flexible. That's because I don't have any strong views or a great deal of experience. So if you're in my boat, you might maybe gravitate towards a slightly bigger firm, which has got more offerings. Whereas if you've got a bit more expertise or you've done some experience in crime or immigration, then absolutely, just as Amanda said, just remain switched on and very aware of the risk as you proceed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I've heard, I don't know, you and your peers, Andy, whether you've heard that actually those that are getting qualified work experience are actually having decent training programs formulated for them rather than the fear. There'll be a few bad apples like there always is, isn't there? Have you heard anything on the ground for people that have got qualified work experience offered to them to see whether there's, there is integrity behind the offering?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very much a mixed bag, and it does vary by, I suppose, sector a little bit. So I know one of my friends worked in intellectual property law, and he had a really good training experience because they did a year where you work in the office and then you go and do the study to qualify. So that was quite an alternative sector, and that worked really well for them. On the flip side, I know someone who was working at a kind of an insolvency and restructuring firm, and they were very much, they had no legal background, and the firm expected them to do the PGDL, which is normally like a 1-year course, the SQE, normally another year course, and do all that alongside full-time work in 2 years. So the demands were quite extreme, and as it's turned out, that relationship hasn't gone any further, and they parted ways. So I think the key thing is, there is a mixed bag out there, and there's no shame in saying, actually, I don't think this firm is for me. I don't think this is going to help my career, because my friend almost got herself into quite a difficult situation. The only one additional point I would say as well is don't overlook legal apprenticeships, because if you might be 17, 18 thinking, okay, A-level results tomorrow, what am I going to do? That's fine. Trust me, the apprenticeship route, so I'm getting my training contracts with Eversheds, and not to plug them excessively, but they have a quite a large legal apprenticeship scheme, and their first cohort is about 5 or 6 years in, so they're doing really, really well, because then you earn while you study. You're obviously getting that experience in a firm, highly likely to get a job at the end of it. So I know we talk about kind of the 2 years qualifying work experience, but you can actually kind of do it through the apprenticeship route and extend it over 6. And that is, it's hardcore, don't get me wrong, they work hard, but it can be a really good experience and a way to get into the profession. Legal apprenticeships can be a really good opportunity to kind of get into the profession as well and get that experience over 5 or 6 year period. You get your qualifications as well, and ideally get a job at the end of it. So very much a mixed bag. I know some paralegals as well, they've ended up actually doing training contracts anyway, which is totally fine. It gets them that training. So if you are a paralegal and thinking, well, maybe I could use this experience, depending on what people might sign off, don't worry if you get offered a training contract instead. You're still on the track, 2 more years to kind of qualify, and that's fine. It's just more experience for you to go forward into practice. So to sum up quite a ramble, very much a mixed bag. Don't be afraid to be quite critical of firms, because honestly, this is a new system, and not all of them, they're trying to adapt to it at the same time. So if it should be a 2-way dialogue. So if you don't feel your training's progressing well, or you don't think that what they're asking you to do is feasible, then just ask them about it and work it out. Because I know a lot of firms have been really quite amenable to it. You've seen it as well, I'm sure, in the news with kind of the SQE1, SQE2 kind of issues, people maybe not passing, and then firms saying it's all right, we'll stick with you, sit it again. So there's a lot of flexibility there. So it's not all doom and gloom.
No. And I think you're absolutely right on legal apprenticeships. I think, they're absolutely worth exploring alongside the more traditional routes that we've looked at. And I think the other point I think it's really important to say for students is that with the old training contract period recognised training, the supervision and recording and noting of that, actually the responsibility for that was probably heavily borne by the law firm who was doing the training contract and reporting back on that. With the qualified work experience, because it can now be obtained at 4 different places, the burden has really switched, and it is on you as the student obtaining that qualified work experience that need to be extremely proactive. And the SRA have got a great template on their website. Again, I keep plugging the SRA website, but that is where all your information really about qualified work experience, as well as the Law Society website. But the SRA website is where you need to go if you want to know more about this. And they have actually got a webinar for candidates wanting to know about that you can listen to. But on the website, where they have a list of what the competencies are, they also have a template that you can use, either print off theirs and use it, or you can just adapt it for your own use. But what you need to do is you need, at the end of the day, to have a solicitor. And don't forget, if someone is coming to me to say, will you sign off my qualified work experience, I am putting my practicing certificate on the line by signing that off for you. And so I want to know that actually what I'm signing off is accurate. It's no different than you signing off anything as a solicitor to say, I'm declaring this is accurate. I want to know it is accurate. How am I going to be happy that what you're showing me to sign off is accurate? Well, I will be happy to sign that off if we've been having a conversation throughout. So, for example, Andy, you're saying, when you sign off this, what I'm doing in practice, as long as we've had a conversation at the beginning and you say, are you happy to sign this off? And I say, absolutely, I am. And we have regular meetings where I see what you're doing. I'm monitoring the hours that you're doing. I'm aware as well that what you are engaging in counts as qualified work experience. I'm seeing you doing that. Yes, that meets the criteria. I will then sign it off. If you go to somebody at the end of your 2 years and say, will you sign off what I've been doing as qualified work experience? They might say, no, I've got no insight whatsoever into what you've been doing. And yes, you've recorded it on paper for me to see, but how do I know that's accurate? You haven't spoken to me beforehand. You haven't kept me informed of what you're doing. I've got no way of checking your hours or what you've been doing over those 2 years. I am not going to sign that off against my own practicing certificate. I'm sorry. And although the SRA guidelines says if you can sign off qualified work experience, it has to be what they say, if it is proportionate. I've written some of the notes. If it's reasonable and proportionate for you to sign it off, that's the two words I've used, then you have to. But actually, it's not reasonable to sign it off against your own practicing certificate if you have no insight into what that candidate has been doing. That is one of the things that they've said. So there is the kind of that carrot again of them saying you can claim your historical experience as qualified work experience. I think, though, the problem there is that because people didn't know that could be used, for example, your law firm that you're going to now to say, well, can you sign off what I did in 2018 to 2019? They might say, well, we've just got no record anymore of what you've done there. So, and have you got an accurate record as well? And so they don't have to sign that off if they haven't got the records for that. And that's maybe where you need a conversation if you're looking at signing off historical qualified work experience with the person that you're because there may be timesheets. Every good firm should have kind of like timesheets and billing records. So they might be able to actually just print that off and somebody can look at it and with you and go through it and verify that. But actually, you can see that there's a possibility. What you don't want to be doing is undertaking qualified work experience, not linking in with anybody about it. And then at the end of the 2 years, they say, actually, I'm sorry, I'm not signing this off because I've just got no records to verify this against. So it is upon you as the candidate to be proactive here. I know admin sometimes isn't everybody's forte, but you really have to be on top of this because see it as the possibility that if you're not, it might not be recorded and signed off by somebody. Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a really good point. And of course, it's actually a two-way process as well, because if you're in contact with someone regularly, then they'll be training you, so it'll be helping your career.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's not a pure.
You should be having those discussions anyway about, how am I doing? How am I developing? This is what I've done now. Is there a next stage I can develop? And that's what we were saying before about, firms with integrity, organizations with integrity training you and putting together a training program. And these regular meetings, like you said, Andy, should be part and parcel of that. And that's these meetings where you get them to sign off. Because also don't forget, your supervisor may leave. So people leave law firms, people move on. So if you're getting it signed off and actually physically get it signed off on that template, on that journal as you're going along. So if whoever is supervising you disappears in 18 months' time, you haven't got to go and find somebody else to try and cover that signing off. It's being signed off as you're going along. I think that's really important. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Make sure that when you're starting your qualified work experience, you sit down with somebody, you set out your expectations. This is also the guidance from the SRA. Set out your expectations of what you want as a training program, that you want it signed off as qualified work experience. And also, I think important for maybe paralegals to know is that what do they want at the end of it? Do they want to actually go to work as a qualified solicitor? Because a law firm, just because you've completed as a paralegal your qualified work experience, they don't have to change you from being a paralegal on completion to that. You can still be hired as a paralegal. So, what is your expectation? That conversation to save disappointment and frustration for everybody should be had at the beginning. What are your expectations as a student? If I'm claiming my work as a paralegal here, my expectations are then that I will become associate solicitor maybe at the end of that period of having my qualified work experience signed off. If they are saying, no, we're not prepared to recruit you in that, do you want to stay there and do that work there? And also just to make sure they're on board with signing off as you're going along. I think they're important conversations to have. But I think for for the first time. So that's one of the big sea changes as well. I think the burden of who has to be the most proactive has changed from the firm to the candidate now.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of, if we were to summarize in a nutshell, how would you kind of describe kind of QWE just in a sound bite? To put you on the spot.
A great opportunity if you get it right.
Absolutely. I think you're totally right. As I think, the reason the kind of the SQE system was brought in was to kind of widen participation, which is obviously a good thing. I think this is where you can cash in on that, because I think it's very difficult. It's a big ask to do SQE 1 and 2 without any kind of study. I think you'd be a brilliant solicitor if you could do that. As I think the QWE is where you can cash in on that flexibility. But as you've been saying, you need to be active in managing it yourself, sort of documenting it, also directing and being in charge of your own training. And finally, where's your career going? So am I going to stay here at the end of it? Do I want to be looking for another job while I'm doing this? Or do I want to just leave this firm and try somewhere else now?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Any quick tips, Andy, that you would say for getting good qualified work experience? So
obviously I went down kind of the training contract route, and that was where I tried to get my QWE, because it's an oven ready package. And as I've already said, I wanted to kind of go for a bigger firm so I'd have more choices, basically, because I didn't know what I was going to like doing. In terms of getting kind of training contracts or any kind of qualifying work experience, I think never underestimate the importance of actually picking up the phone or interfacing with people. So that can be go to law fairs. Literally, you can actually just walk into practices and have a chat with them if you may be on the high street, if that's your kind of thing. Don't be embarrassed about that, because the worst they're going to say is, yeah, sorry, no. But you only need it to work once. That's what I always say when I was doing applications, and you get rejected a lot. That's the way it goes, and it's the same with my friends. But if you send 30 applications and one sticks, then your career's sorted. So it's fine, and you're putting in 30 applications for the one that works. That's the cost. It's not a rejection per se. So I think do try and put yourself out there and just throw what you can at it. Have chats with people, make connections. And kind of as a related point to that, I wasn't sure originally if I was going to try and go to be a solicitor or a barrister. So I spoke to both at the fairs, and mini pupilages can be 2 or 3 days, and it's quite straightforward to get them if you just talk to people at a fair. So quite straightforward. It's difficult, but you can do things quite informally. Whereas with other firms, like vacation schemes, tend to be like, okay, this is the one a year, so there's a big process. So you can use that informality to your advantage. Get a few days in chambers, and then that's more experience. And even if you turn around and say, I did that, and then confirm I wanted to be a solicitor, that's nothing to be embarrassed about. Because all you're doing is actually making informed decisions, because it is actually, your future. I know we kind of think about, I just want to get to the end goal of being a solicitor, but you actually have to do that. So I think it's important to cast your net widely when you speak to people and get experience, because as Amanda mentioned earlier, you might find you actually like things you thought you wouldn't. I know people who ended up in tax departments and actually and loved it. So or construction, actually, again, is another classic one. People end up in maybe by accident and then they love it. So I think try and keep an open mind. Yeah. In summary, so obviously you're head of pro bono. What kind of tips would you have?
Well, it won't surprise you to know, Andy, that I really rate pro bono as a little tip for people to do. I think you make a really good point on the law fairs as well. People don't give up their time to come along to university law fairs for no reason. They're there because they're looking to recruit and they're looking to get. And I think the students are quite hesitant about sometimes, are we okay to approach them? Are we okay to ask for questions? This is a sales market when they come along to the law fairs. They're after recruiting. So yeah, do come and talk to them. That's what they're there for. Be bold, lose all your inhibitions, just be a little bit thick-skinned for an hour and go around and say, are you recruiting? Are you recruiting as a paralegal? What's your back schemes? How have you found it? They will often send somebody senior and someone from HR and training along to these law fairs. And like you said as well, chambers come along. They're there for a reason. They're there to recruit. And so it's a win-win for you. It's even a bigger win because not every student will kind of feel comfortable approaching them. So if you are you put on, be a bit brave for an hour or two, you'll get a lot from it. Bring a CV, look slightly smart. It's worth it. Our pro bono, we offer pro bono to all. We have an amazing breadth of schemes for students to engage with. And really, we don't design it. It goes back to really, you've got to think of what value qualified work experience has. It can be gained at 4 places, but really if you have a week's 35 hours of qualified work experience from somewhere, does it really carry that much weight? We would say that, for our department's purposes, certainly, that what we design our pro bono for is to get you 2 years probably qualified work experience at a law firm that you think that you might want to be at the future, as is the old training contract recognised period of training route. So, but what we want to do is give you that experience that when you're going for that interview for that qualified work experience, you're ahead of the game because you are a safe pair of hands. You've had experience of professional ethics. You know what a third party instruction is. You know not just what a conflict of interest is. In a scenario they might give you in your interview, you know how to apply it in practice. You have that experience of triaging clients, calling a client, speaking to clients in extreme difficult sensitive issues and identifying what is important. If you are nervous with presenting, going out into the community and doing these presentations, I love sending students out to schools because school children are just so impolite, really. They're restless, they're bored, they threw the water bottles. If you can hold an audience of 500 13-year-old girls, you're sorted for life in front of any judge for the future in the court tribunals. Nothing will be as bad as 500 13-year-old girls to keep their attention. So, that it's great experience, it's great practice for you to feel really confident when you're making those applications, when you're going for interview, when you're doing those kind of exercises for back schemes for your qualified work experience 2 years. So I would really, it won't surprise you to say, we really encourage every student to come and get some pro bono on your CV whilst you're at the university to get that really essential. I'd say it's essential if you're going to be successful in your interviews for qualified work experience for the future to actually do that. Don't see it as I want to get 4 hours off my 1,400 hours qualified work experience necessity. See it that I am getting something really valuable on my CV. I'm getting really invaluable experience that I can talk about at interview and show them I'm a front runner as a candidate. That's what we design the pro bono for. So that's a little plug. Shamelessly, but I think it's important.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And also the kind of the softer element as well is just getting out there, getting into a professional environment. I remember doing interviews when I was at university and it's like, oh, hang on, I've been presenting about some kind of slightly anarchy classics topic and now I'm trying to talk about the real world and you feel exposed. Whereas if you do this experience, it kind of preps you more generally as well. It's not just, okay, this is an example, something I did on pro bono. It's, okay, this is how I talk in a professional environment. This is how I function as part of a team. This is how I even, look presentable. All that factors in, so you can use it as a kind of a litmus test for going forward to get more qualifying work experience in whatever form that might be. Yeah, I think that's really important for them. I think that's really important, and it does take slight organisational management to try and set aside some time. But some of the pro bono, some of the law fairs, it's 2 hours out of your whole academic year, and it's really important that you set time aside for that experience. And like I said, we design it that some of the pro bono we do is just literally 2 hours out of the whole year that you need to be engaged for. So it's possible for everybody, anyone and everyone. And obviously, if you want more, we've got a pathway of development that you can really get some really good quality experience there. Absolutely, and if I'd say a few things on the time saving front, because it is really difficult. You're studying, you're working, you're trying to juggle all these different plates effectively. I would make sure when you go around to law fairs, maybe have a preset list of questions, and that could literally be what would you say makes your firm distinct, or why did you pick your firm? Because that saves you the issue of, okay, tell me about your firm generally, because I probably actually looked at you before I turned up to the fair, and that, so I don't need that as an icebreaker. I can just go straight in. And equally, write down people's names, write down anything interesting they said or that you'd like to follow up on, because then you can connect to email with them, get them on LinkedIn. And that's not just kind of to have them in some kind of network. It's so if you decide, actually, I like this firm, I'm going to apply there, just ask them for their advice. Because I know loads of trainees who will literally, some trainees offer to even look at your application before you apply to their firm. So you can tap in and get all that assistance. And the other thing I would just recommend for online applications for any kind of experience, obviously have your CV up and ready. But you might find, if there's always like, tell me about a time you worked in a team, just have the same example that you write, and then you can just tweak it for different firms. But I'd like a master copy of, okay, tell me when you worked in a team, when you worked in a stressful situation. And so I could just plonk them in. And so I'm not having to rewrite it every time. And that speeds it up and increases your volume of applications for,
That's a great tip. That is a great tip. And that's what we say to the students as well. And, sometimes have one example ready for your application, a different example ready for your interview, but keep that master list. You're absolutely spot on, Andy. Some great tips there today. I just want to say thank you for everybody for joining me and Andy, and thanks to Andy as well. You've been invaluable to listen to here. And don't forget to follow us on socials to be notified about new podcast episodes in this future Solicitor series, or you can visit our website at www.law.ac.uk to learn more about our courses. Thank you ever so much, Andy, and I'm sure what you said was really, really useful for everybody.
Thanks, Amanda. Cheers.
Thanks everyone for listening.